welcome everyone to Mulberry Talent Partners Leadership Conversation. We are so happy to be here in 2022 and kick off the new year with our guest, Jen Lowrance. So jumping right into a little bit about Mulberry. We are a full service staffing and recruiting agency headquartered in Portland, Oregon, with an office in the Silicon Valley. We specialize in the professional placements of human resources, professional and financial office, payroll and operations positions with direct hire, temp to hire, and temporary opportunities. I would encourage you to check out our website at mulberrytalent.com to view our full suite of service offerings, as well as previous and upcoming leadership conversations. So jumping right into introductions, we are joined today by our very own Kristen McConnell. She is our Director of Talent and Operations and joined Mulberry back in June of 2021 and comes with over 25 years of talent acquisition experience. We're also joined by Jen Lowrance. She is a 20-year HR professional and holds a master's degree in education from Boston University and also has her PHR and SHRM CP certification. She's the founder of Storybridge Creations, which focuses on transforming policies into pictures. And in case I didn't introduce myself, I am Kelsey Daly, the talent acquisition specialist here at Mulberry. And we are missing Lauren Francis here today. She says hello. She is traveling right now, but she wishes she could be here and misses you all. So we want today to be super interactive, so do not shy away from using the Q&A function on Zoom, and we'll try to get to any and all of those questions that come in. We also have a fun giveaway. Jen has graciously offered to give away one opportunity to transform one lucky winner's policy into a graphic novel format. So we will announce the winner of that in the recording email that goes out this week. So be on the lookout and good luck. Without further ado, I would like to pass it off to Jen.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kelsey. All right, let me get in here and I will share my screen. Give me just a second. All right, awesome. Okay, cool. We're looking good? Very good. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much for that introduction. Yes, I am here to talk to you today about a new kind of employee handbook, revolutionizing the way that employees read about your company and your policies through the graphic novel format. But first, just as Kelsey said, I've been in HR for over 20 years, so I've been around employee handbooks a lot. And I'm a bit of a geek and love science fiction and fantasy, so you may see my Harry Potter books back behind me. And I also believe that there's a lot of power and potential about seeing something instead of just reading about it, which led me to the idea of transforming our handbooks into graphic novels. So why do we have employee handbooks, right? So they provide impactful onboarding. It gives new employees critical information on the company they have just joined. It informs about company values. What is important at this company? What are the behaviors that are valued here? It also helps with wayfinding. Handbooks point employees toward where they can find additional information when needed, such as benefits or regulations. It is also a reference document. The handbook becomes a reference manual of sorts for established employees to check when they have questions. And of course, it provides employer protection against those legal actions that employees may have. So it provides that good information. So that's why we have them, but do employees read your handbook? So in a GuideSpark benefit survey from 2014, they found that 50% of millennials, so those folks born after 1980, didn't read their employee handbook. And 33% of young boomers, so those folks that are in their like 50s or 60s, they didn't read their handbook, right? So the older generation isn't, the younger generation isn't. 36% of millennials don't even know where it is anymore, versus the 23% of the 60-year-olds that do. 25% that did read it didn't find it helpful, and then 11% didn't even open their handbook. So let's also talk about our attention span over the last few years, right? So here's a graph of our attention span from 2000 to 2015. And on the left, you see that in 2000, our attention span was 15 seconds. And on the far right, you see that our attention span has dropped to 8.25 seconds. So what's in the middle there at that 9 seconds? That is the attention span of a goldfish, right? So we're below a goldfish right now. So we've talked about if they're reading our handbooks, but let's focus on, can employees read our handbooks? And the answer is maybe. The Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development completes this study, the Program of International Assessment of Adult Competencies, every 10 years. So it includes adults from 16 to 65 in developed countries. The most recent study was done in 2013, and the results are disheartening. The average American reads at about a 7th to 8th grade level. 4% are non-literate, 14% have below basic literacy levels, and half of US adults can't read a book written at the 8th grade level. So whether or not they pick it up in the first place is questionable for our employee handbooks, but most Americans can only read at the 7th or 8th grade level. And if something is a struggle, you only have seconds to grab the employee's attention. And if something is too hard and the value is not immediately apparent, like employee policies, then employees are going to skip it. So what can you do? Grab the reader right away. So classrooms and school libraries are increasingly turning to graphic novels to help capture the attention of young readers. In fact, many books that we grew up with have been upgraded to graphic novels. The visual element helps young students read and understand. So if kids are drawn into stories that are graphic novels, could adults be? The short answer is yes. Visual elements are why services like Instagram and Pinterest have exploded. People love pictures. Here's the other element that has increased in the last few years: the importance of diversity and belonging in the workplace. This important work is getting far more attention in strategic planning and organizations than ever before. We've already discussed how the employee handbook is one of the first policy introductions your new employees have to your organization. Does your current handbook show how diverse new employees fit into your company's culture? Are you showing from the outset that your company embraces all people for the talent that they bring? Adding that element can resonate deeply with people and will create deposits in your company's trust bank. So graphic novels allow you to also customize your unique company culture and workplace. So whether you are an organization that is manufacturing, you are in an office environment, or maybe you are fully remote, right? Fully distributed workforce. You can highlight that in pictures and showcase that, how this is unique, how this is what your company is like. So let's look at a real example, right? So most sexual harassment policies look like this, right? Lots of text, maybe some bullets highlighting, defining what sexual harassment is, right? But with the graphic novel format, your sexual harassment policy can look like this, right? Highlighting individuals in real situations experiencing that. And I know from my years in HR, and I suspect we have a lot of folks in HR here as well, you've heard a lot, you've had to investigate a lot, right? And you know how this shows up in your workplace, and hopefully it doesn't, right? But you want to show that and show what happens. And that really gets to the importance of why we have our handbooks, what to do next, and the real impact of this. So how do you go about bringing your employee handbook to life? First, pictures over text. Graphic novels are far more likely to be read than traditional text handbooks. Tell the story behind the policy. Graphic novel style allows you to show the importance of your policy through a narrative, enriching the reader experience and your culture. And then representation matters. Showing diverse characters in your policy is another way for you to highlight to your employee population that all are welcome. So that's a little bit about StoryBridge and what we do and the value that I see in going in a different direction and in a different medium. So I open it up to questions and get Kelsey and Kristen back on the line. Thank you.
Yeah, so Jen, I'll start off here. Hi, everybody, it's Kristen. I am curious, how did you come up with the name StoryBridge and what's the significance behind that?
Yeah, so actually, thank you so much for asking. So StoryBridge to me, the reason behind that is that it is a bridge between two mediums, right? And so I talked about text and, you know, these pages and pages of words really, right? And how that's kind of lacking to grab the reader's attention. And then if you go all the way across to a totally different medium, but then you have motion pictures, right? You have television, right? And so to me, graphic novels sit right between those two, right? It is moving toward, you know, full animation or full video, but it still has that component of being able to pick up something and just read through it or reference it, which is a very important component of having that handbook, right? I think videos have their place, but I think graphic novels, it's a unique way to plug in that's getting more and more traction.
Mm-hmm.
So we're
Absolutely.
between the two.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and if I actually never heard that stat before that we're sitting less than a goldfish at this point on our attention span. So
It's a little disheartening, isn't it? I'm like, oh boy, that's a goldfish is beating me out.
absolutely, absolutely. Kelsey, did others have questions that have come through too?
Not yet, but feel free to ask any questions anyone has and we'll get those answered.
Sure. Well, I am wondering if people might be thinking about, you know, if their company wanted to move forward with something like this. Do you have a sense, Jen, of what you can? We don't need all your information on pricing, but curious how something like this would look in terms of overall cost.
Yeah, I think that's a fair question, right? I liken it a lot to home remodel, right? So if anyone has ever remodeled their bathroom or their kitchen, I think you can see and know that there are a lot of different prices out there, right? And so certainly it can be a very high price point if you go with really top end, best of the best, fully outsourced, right? And it really depends on how expansive it is, right? Is this a huge kitchen with multiple stations, or is this maybe just a little galley kitchen, right? So it really depends on scope. And then there's also the DIY component of it too, right? Are there components that you and your HR team or you and your company can do yourself, right? Can you figure out kind of the stories you want to highlight? What do those panels look like? And maybe even just going for part of it, right? So instead of maybe a full remodel, maybe we're just going to do the backsplash, right? Maybe we're just going to highlight this one policy and see how this resonates with our culture, right? So I think you can really make it fit your budget if this is an area of an interest and something that you see a lot of power in. So I think, and that would probably be my approach in a lot of cases, unless someone's kind of all in, but having that policy or a couple policies and maybe highlighting those to provide a little more visual interest into your employee handbook versus maybe going full bore with the full remodel and the full employee handbook graphic novel. So there's certainly a few different components, but it can certainly range in the thousands of dollars, and I think you can also get that down if you have in-house resources. And Portland is a pretty artistic community, right? You may have folks on staff that are artists and that can help with this, or may know folks, right? So I think that's probably one of my favorite things about the Portland area is that it's really networked, it's really well connected, and it is so artistic. So mining your own resources certainly would be a place to start of like, do you have artists on staff, or do they know of artists that you might be able to partner with? And then if you're looking at this and you're pretty cost sensitive, then are there just a few that you'd like to highlight in this capacity?
Great.
Well, we do have quite a few questions rolling through, so I'm gonna
Great.
steal them off. Kat's wondering, how do you balance covering your legal bases with important policies and language with the more engaging graphic format effectively?
Yeah, and I think that there's still that component of being able to do that. And so what I've done in some of my policies is actually for the legalese that you have to have in there, having a character, articulate that, or maybe having a whiteboard behind them, flashing between, a classroom training setting, and or just fully unpacking that. So I think you can still do it. And like I have said before, it may be a matter of like you're kind of chunking through on some of the storytelling elements of like showcasing that in graphic novel, but then also having that, that text, below those pictures as well.
Okay, great. Alyssa's wondering, are there some policies that you feel are more important / easier to come across in graphic novel format?
This is an area that is typically in employee handbooks, but one of my favorite areas to start with is really the foundation story, that genesis story. How did your company start? What are the values that are important there, and how do they show up? So I think that's one that would really resonate a lot. If innovation is one of your company's core values, well, what does innovation look like? Is that coming with lots of ideas? Is that sticking with something? Is that, asking for lots of feedback? Maybe all of those things. But I think being able to show people and how they navigate through the company when they demonstrate those values really is a big one that starts. And then I think if there's others that you really do want to highlight, that you are a diverse organization and that's a place of strength and something that you want the employees to know. Pictures are really going to go further in highlighting that for your population. If you're an organization that has, struggled with sexual harassment, maybe that is one that you showcase why this is really important and how you go forth to report why this is important to pay attention to and how it shows up. In some cases, maybe folks don't fully understand that microaggressions are a form of harassment, right? And what that looks like. So I think it's really looking at what is your organization struggling with? What could you solve if you had a magic wand? And going after those first.
Wonderful. That's great. Okay, another question. Curious how you have seen the graphic novel employee handbook accepted by employees. It's a really cool idea.
So I think that it is one of those that really has change management around it, and making sure that your executive team is on board with it, that your employees know that it's coming. And again, I think that's also why it's really important to start small for it, because it is so different, right? And so instead of having it, be dismissed or not seen with the value that it could be, that it's about that vehicle of change management around it.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, and then have there been any studies done that the graphic novel style has a better knowledge retention rate? Have there been any instances where this format may distract from the legal content?
So I'll be honest, I don't know of any studies that have gone through, because this is such a different format regarding the legalese component and the retention. But again, I think it goes to that visual component of, are they retaining that information now through that text format? And again, as we've seen with lots of other mediums, that picture is worth 1,000 words, has far more ability to and potential to be retained.
Mm-hmm. Great. Next question. Do you have an example of how this format was used at a long established company that might have an old school culture?
So no, I think it really does depend on your organization. And I do think that for maybe a longer established company, that this might be something that, again, in that format of starting small and then growing from there to see and to build that acceptance and that excitement around it. I see this way having a lot more potential in, possibly younger startup type companies, and maybe companies that have kind of populations that did grow up on these graphic novels that I had showcased a little earlier, right? Where they're looking for something that that is a little different, right? They joined your company because they wanted to be a little bit different. You're doing things a little bit different, and so your handbook should reflect something that's a little bit different too. So for long established companies, you know, I do, again, looking to those HR professionals of, does this make sense in your culture? Would this be accepted? And if you're, you know, up to challenging that status quo, again, picking that one policy of what would resonate well and trying it first versus kind of going full bore of like, all right, let's do it, graphic novel handbooks. Because I certainly have been in and know longer established companies, you know, this might not be the right medium for all companies, but for some, I think it's going to really resonate strongly.
Absolutely. Okay, those are all the questions for now. If anybody has any more questions, oh, we have one come through. Okay, here's another. In addition to handbooks, have you seen this format used for training retention materials? Construction could benefit strongly.
You know, that's a great idea. I have not kind of gone forth into training, and I think, you know, you're right about construction being a great place to start. I think that there's a lot of potential in this. I'm starting with policies and handbooks because, again, been in 20 years of HR. I know HR, and I think that there's a different way we can do things. But I do think that this has a lot of applications with training, and certainly with talent attraction as well. Because I think what a lot of our, you know, HR teams and organizations are facing right now is, you know, why us? Why join us, right? And I think being able to step forward and show how you're doing things differently at your company, and that's something worth joining, is part of that. And having an employee handbook that resonates in that different way is part of that too, and part of that story. And I did want to put this offer to, you know, I have my information out there, and certainly feel free to drop me a line. But that policy that I've flashed with the sexual harassment, I'm happy to send that to any folks that are interested, as far as just like, what's a sample look like on this? You know, happy to provide that to any of our listeners here, just for a further sample of like, you know, how does this pretty bread and butter HR policy, how does this really show up in graphic novel format?
That's perfect. That would be great. I think the audience would really love to see that. So
Awesome, wonderful.
great. And we can also include that in our email that goes out with the recording, so that everyone who is registered can see that as well.
Perfect.
Jen, I'm curious, so from the time of, you know, you decide this is what you want to do, how does that process start? Who is all typically involved, and how long does it take, would you say? Let's say you were going to go full bore on a 25-page employee handbook. Like, what should companies expect in terms of timeline?
You know, honestly, because there is an artistic component of this, and there is a change management component of this as well, it would likely be several months, right? So that we can make sure that we are ticked and tied with, you know, what your organization wants to showcase, and that the artwork is coming through in the way that resonates with your organization too. And so I think, again, it's working with your HR and making sure that your leadership team is on board with it as well, right? Again, great potential with this, but we don't necessarily want HR to kind of go off in a box and then, you know, suddenly the executive team's like, wait, what'd you do here? So making sure that they have an awareness around that. And then I think also the opportunity to build excitement around it too. So it's not, I mean, even with a traditional employee handbook review, those tend to take some time anyway, usually not, you know, months and months. But I don't know about you, but my experience with employee handbooks is it tends to be one of those things that a lot of times falls further down on the HR to-do list, right? And you're like, right, we got to get back to that one, right? So it can certainly kind of fall down further. But I think allowing and making sure that your organization is comfortable with that idea of, you know, a few months timeline to make sure. I think there's also the potential, if you do go full bore, having issues. That's something that, of course, comic books have done great at, right? And creating a story arc through there. And that way you can kind of drop that in over, you know, have a monthly issue that drops and builds that excitement and really, you know, showcases the policies that you want first in that first issue or that you're struggling with. You have that additional opportunity on, you know, issue 2 and issue 3. And so that's a way that you can also make sure that you are ticked and tied and moving well with the organization.
That's a great idea, the monthly drops, and to build that excitement. And and I think this goes a long way. I think we're all hopeful that 2022 maybe brings a little bit less of the great resignation and a little bit more of how do we retain our talent and keep people, that we've worked so hard to get this past, year and two, just with everything that we've been through. And I think, these types of changes and mindsets go a long way in helping companies achieve that. So that's great. It's a great idea.
Cool. Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm pretty excited. I think it unlocks a lot of different avenues for companies to be able to show the impact of what's important, why them, and to really also show, how these things show up in the workplace. I know that in HR, we kind of got a catbird seat, so to speak, of being able to see when these policies are put into action, what really has happened. And in some cases, it's extremely difficult. It's really heartbreaking, right? And so to be able to show kind of more insight into, why does this matter? Why is this important? Why should I, as your basic employee, or your individual contributor, why should I be paying attention, right? It's like, because this matters. This matters a lot with the employee experience and, being able to retain great people and for them to have a positive work experience, right? We're in a place right now where people have options, and I think being able to showcase what your company is really about just will go further to helping you retain that talent that you've worked so hard to keep.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, great. It looks like we don't have any more questions. I'm going to share my screen again and just share a few updates and what we have going on for the lineup this year so far. So for leadership conversations, we're going to be joined by Jeff Iman for a 3-part series focused on the war on talent. So part 1 is on February 1st. It will be about attracting and retaining talent. February 22nd is part 2, which will be about the objectives and challenges of remote work. And then part 3 is on March 15th, and it is called the interview process redesign. So we will send an email out to all in the coming weeks with how to register for those, and we're excited for those. And then here's a way to stay in touch with us. Feel free to connect with all of us on LinkedIn, email us, check out our website, and we are looking forward to staying in touch. But a big thank you to Jen for joining us today, and thank you to everyone for choosing to tune in.